welcome everyone, and nice to see everybody for our World Seagrass Association seminars. This is the first of many that we've got in 2025. My name's Emma Jackson, so took over the reins of president of WSA earlier this year. I'd just like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands that I'm working today, which is Gladstone Central Queensland, and that's the Bailey, the Gurang, the Gureng, and the Tarrablang Bunda people, and pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And now I'd like to just introduce Dr. Milica Stankovic. So Milica is a lecturer and researcher at Dugong and Seagrass Research Station at the Prince Songa University in Thailand, where she focuses on understanding and enhancing the role of seagrass ecosystems as carbon sinks. And her research spans blue carbon, seagrass ecology, GIS, big list, coastal ecosystem mapping, and she has a strong emphasis on finding nature-based solutions for climate change and advancing sustainable conservation practices across Thailand and Southeast Asia. Currently, she's leading projects on blue carbon research, seagrass ecosystem assessments, and then international conservation frameworks, which is working closely with global networks such as the IOC Subcommission for the Western Pacific and Global Ocean Decade Programme for Blue Carbon. So quite a great list, and she's actively involved in capacity building and running workshops to strengthen expertise in coastal ecosystem management. So fantastic work. And late last year, some of you might have heard the alarming reports of that emerged from widespread seagrass decline in Thailand, and that raised concerns about the impact on marine ecosystems, in particular the loss and impacts on species such as dugong. And Milica is going to provide an overview of the current situation, ongoing efforts to quantify the loss, and the emerging observations from the region. She's joined by online by a number of colleagues and partners from Thailand, and hopes that the seminar is really an opportunity for seagrass experts and researchers to discuss some of the potential strategies for addressing these declines, exchanging insights and exploring whether similar trends are occurring elsewhere. If you think of any comments or questions for Milica as she presents, then please feel free to use the chat, but we'll keep the discussions to the end of the seminar. So Milica, welcome, and over to you if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Wait, you have to allow me to share again. And thank you all for taking your lunchtime to listen to this talk. Hopefully we'll have this will be an opportunity to connect. Okay, now I can share. To connect on many different levels, and as we are experiencing this, we would highly appreciate any comments, suggestions, or collaborations future down the line. I think you can see my full screen right now.
Yes, that looks great.
Yeah, okay. Okay, just a second. Okay, great. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I titled my talk Drastic Changes because we haven't quantified the complete loss. Is it a permanent loss? Is there any recovery and so on? So we are for now putting it as changes, but we'll see hopefully in the near future how that will pan out. So just an overview where I'm from for the new people. So I'm based in Hat Yai, which is very far away from Bangkok, in the southern Thailand, at Prince of Songkhla University. We also have a marine field station that is currently being built here at Libong Island, which is one of the areas where which was one of a dugong hotspot area, with number of dugongs coming there to feed, mate, and it was very easy. And the seagrass bed was the second largest one in the country. So we have at Dugong and Seagrass Research Station, we have two parts, I would say. One is about science and scientific research of seagrass and dugongs, and we have multiple students and researchers. And the second part is about dugong veterinary care and advancing the research of the dugongs in terms of veterinary care. So we are trying to encompass the seagrass and dugongs in multiple directions, so we can get a better picture and clear view. All right, so I will start now officially with the presentation. So seagrasses, seagrass in Thailand are basically in a diversity hotspot in the Southeast Asia. And they occur, we have two different coasts. East coast, which is part of the Pacific Ocean, which is Gulf of Thailand, and we have West coast, which is Andaman Sea, which belongs to the Indian Ocean. And these two coasts have completely different types, circulations, and other variables. And along those, we have along each of those coasts, we have seagrass ecosystems, of course, with a different diversity. In total, for Thailand, we have 13 species, and the numbers here in each province is about how many species we have. Or had in each province so far. So you can see that the West Coast is much more diverse, is much more variable, and have a higher diversity of species. So for example, Halophila major is only found on the West Coast, but for example, for other cases, Rupia maritima is only found on the East Coast in Gulf of Thailand. And the seagrass meadows here in Thailand are mostly occurring in the very shallow waters. So this is the example of one of our study sites at Komuk Island. This is a hotel, and this here 500 meters from the beach was a huge seagrass bed. And when the low tide comes, it's all exposed and everyone is free to walk on that, around it. So mentioned, most of our meadows are intertidal, but we still have some subtidal meadows in some specific areas. But to our knowledge so far, there are not many subtidal meadows. And of course, we have single species meadow versus multiple species meadows. In most cases, it is multiple species co-occurring together. In some most diverse seagrass beds, we have 6 or 7 species co-occurring together. And of course, they provide multiple ecosystem services. This is the example of this area actually here. So this is, even though this is very touristy area with many hotels, the local people still during the low tide come and gather food that they either use for their food, or they sell it on the markets. And seagrasses and dugongs are, I would say, culturally very important for Thailand. And these are some of the examples where pictures of dugongs and seagrasses have been seen across many provinces, like in promotional materials, for example, water bottles, the postcards, scarves, even pictures on the school walls, and so on. And of course, I have to mention that one of these areas is a dugong hotspot that, as far as I've read, is one of the biggest, has one of the biggest dugong populations beside Australia. And the numbers so far, as far as I can remember, are about between 100 and something dugongs in terms of the population size. So based on the literature review, so far we know that the seagrasses have been declining about 2.8% per year. But in 2020, the study came for the whole Southeast Asia, which kind of assessed that the declining rate for seagrass meadows in this region is 4.7. But of course, you can see in Thailand that the trend is increasing, which was before the decline. And of course, there is a huge lack of data across many countries, such as Indonesia, Philippines, Cambodia, and so on. And then based on the global reports, the tropical Indo-Pacific is steadily declining. But I would say this data is based on the very scarce and limited data set. So of course, we don't know the real situation of the past declines. So since 1990s, the threats to seagrass ecosystems have been recorded, which were grouped into coastal development, sedimentation, destructive fishing, and aquaculture. Some of them improved, but majority of them remained until today. And nothing really changed in terms of conservation. And currently, I mean, the first assessment for Thailand was by Dr. Miguel Fortes that estimated that by 1990s, Thailand lost about 20-30% of its seagrass meadows, which is still a lot, but it was mostly due to aquaculture and changing and land use changes to shrimp ponds and other aquaculture. So we still have some areas that we still have areas that we assessed in terms of the seagrass change. This is the example at Hajau Mai National Park, which is the largest seagrass bed in Thailand, and they produced the images since the 1970s, and the meadows since then until the early 2000s have been completely stable. There has been slight changes, but nothing too major, I would say. And we did a similar study in the East Coast, so in Gulf of Thailand at Koh Tarai, the smaller seagrass bed, where in 2006, the local community gathered and wanted to protect seagrass beds because the government was planning to build a bridge and the port. So the local community asked the monks from the local monks from the local temple to gather around seagrass bed, and they did ritual and they did respect towards the seagrass bed, and that kind of showed to the local communities and others that seagrass beds should be protected. We went back in 2007 and based on the mapping, we kind of assessed that seagrass beds started slightly to increase and improve. Not a lot, but still it is a step forward. And of course, the case study at Koh Libong. So this is the example until 2020. And it's actually my paper we just did from again and early 200s until 2019. We did changes between every 5 years just to see how often the meadow was changing. And we did a composite of that 20-year change where we classified the areas into enduring meadows where the seagrasses were always there throughout this 20-year period, transitory where they had some seasonal occurrences, and then some years were there, some years not really. Permanent loss, so once they were there and then they were completely gone, and permanent new area where the seagrasses expanded during this 20-year period. And based on that, we kind of assessed that about the loss, the overall loss at Koh Libong was about 3.2%, which is not too bad, especially due to the large scale of this meadow. However, from 2020s, we started to notice drastic and dramatic changes. So this is the photo from my PhD in 2016. 2021 is for another project when we went to the same place at Koh Libong. And then this is I think December 2023, where you can actually see some dead rhizomes and the rest is completely gone. This is exactly the same place. I was just turned in a different direction. But we had the GPS coordinate from 2016, so we know it was the same place. So in the last couple of years where the most changes were occurring, and a majority of the meadows completely disappeared. So DMCR has Department of Marine and Coastal Department of Marine and Coastal Research has the monitoring program that is throughout the country, and they have been monitoring seagrass meadows across for many years, and then from 2020, this is based on their data set, how we classified the seagrass meadows in each province, where in the first picture, we can see that some of the meadows are still healthy, like in the southern areas of Thailand. Majority of them are in a moderate condition and very low coverage in couple of provinces, while we still have some healthy meadows towards in the eastern Thailand towards Cambodia. And this is based on the trend of change based on their previous surveys, if the meadows were increasing, stable, or changes through the season. And we can see that most of the meadows in here are changes through the season. And of course, Trang province is saying that so far it has been stable. However, in 2023, since all the seagrass since we started getting reports across the country that a lot of meadows have been changing or completely disappearing, we try to assess through the data that we currently have just to see what is happening. So we gathered it was people from Prince of Songkla University, Nature Mind ED, local NGO from Krabi, DMCR and CSIRO from Australia. We kind of put all of the data from the drone images across 7 sites in the Lower Andaman. So in Phuket, Krabi and Trang province, where majority of the meadows have been affected. Just to see how much change we can see or quantify. Yeah, so I just wanted to know that, for example, at Koh Libong, which is the dugong hotspot, we had 2 sites for Juhoi and Dugong Tower, where we had the previous drone data. And of course, Ha Dao Mai National Park, which is the MPA, we have 2 sites, one on the island and one on the mainland. And since we could not find any methodology that we could officially use, we decided to use the virtual quadrats. So similar quadrats that we use on the field, we just use them virtually on the drone images. And each quadrat was labeled with the numbers. And since you have a quadrat and then you overlay that with the drone images from different years at the same site. So because each quadrat has the location, for each year, it was showing exactly the same place. So we can actually see in each quadrat what was happening within it in different years. And then based on that, we'd quantify that in terms of the habitat change for the blue color, which is the habitat stability. If the quadrat had seagrass and that remained a seagrass, or if the quadrat had sand, that remained as a sand. We quantified as a loss in terms if it was a seagrass, but it changed to sand, and then as a gain if it was a sand and it transformed. It was the seagrass in a later year. Similarly, we did for seagrass coverage change from, for example, from high to high coverage, medium to medium, and low to low, which were grouped as the meadow stability. Losses if it went from a higher seagrass coverage to a lower. So for example, high to low, high to medium, or medium to low. And as a coverage gain, where it went from a lower coverage class to a higher coverage class. So for example, low to high, low to medium, and medium to high. And based on that, we kind of grouped all the data across all 7 sites and looked the number of quadrats that notified that had this change observed. So these are some of the results that we had. So most of the habitat change were at Hajamai National Park and Kolibong, where about 30 to 50 quadrats transitioned from seagrass to sand. So that is the red color, reddish pinkish color. The blue colors are the stability of the meadows. So majority of the virtual quadrats show the transition from seagrass to sand. And then for some of the sites, we actually had several periods of the drone images. So for example, Juhoi is one part of Kolibong. So we had the drone images from 2018 and 20 and 20 to 23. And you can actually see that in between 20 and 23 was when the major changes started to occur, where about 55% of the quadrats transitioned from seagrass to sand. Yeah. Then we did seagrass coverage change, so the similar thing, where again at Hajamai and Kolibong were the major losses, where at Yonglam and Dugong Tower we had a decline of coverage, so the losses more than 50% for Dugong Tower and more than 90% for Yonglam. Which is quite a lot. And in three sites, sorry, we had about the changes of the species that we could identify from the drone images. The interesting thing is, again, Yonglam, which is at Hajamai National Park, where more than 60% of the seagrasses changed from mixed species to Halophila ovalis, or between Enhalos to Halophila ovalis. And approximately 35% had a change from healthy Enhalos to dead Enhalos, and we recorded just the dead rhizomes and shoots just sticking out from the sand. And at the third and the last site again in Trang Province, you can see for our Kham Bay between 20 and 21, Enhalos stayed as an Enhalos for majority of the quadrats. There were some changes between Enhalos that was mixed with something only to Enhalos, and only a few quadrats changed between Enhalos and Halophila. But in between 2021 and 2023, almost all the quadrats, so I put more than 90%, but almost all the quadrats show the change from Enhalos to Halophila. So all of them changed from healthy looking Enhalos to sparse Halophila. And here I'm just putting some examples of how the changes look like. This is example, this is Juhoi at Kolibong. And in 2018, these are the drone images. So this is, for example, mixed seagrass bed, and the darker one in here is Enhalos. In 2020 was exactly the same. 2022, Enhalos is gone. We just have the mixed. And 2023, we just have sparse Halophila. The similar example is here at this location where we have very dense Enhalos achoroides. In 2020, it was very sparse. 2022 was a short leaf, so it was cut to this size. And then 2023 is just the dead rhizomes. And a similar example is for this row here, but in 2023, there were no seagrasses at this location. So this is how it looked like at this location at Kolibong. This is all Enhalos achoroides, very healthy looking, very dense. In 2018, it started to change in terms of the species composition. There was some macroalgal overgrowth on them. And in 2021, this is when we were talking about the dead and hollows, just the rhizomes sticking out. This is another example from, I think it was a part of the canal where we took the underwater photo. And again in 2023, when now it's completely gone. This is the second place at Kolibong, Dugong Tower. It had in 2018, it was still patchy with some dense mixed species, but it was mostly and then with quite a dense halophila beds. In 2020, this area was still very healthy looking. In 2022, the inhallo started to change again to very short leaf. The dense mixed meadows were still there and halophila was still present. But in 2023, it was all classified as a no seagrass at this location. The similar thing again in Hajamai National Park. Unfortunately, we have only 2021 and 2023. So in 2021, this is very dense and mixed species meadows. This is the example of an halos and halophila, and I think some thalassian here. This is 4 species mixed together occurring 2023 when we visited. There were mostly no seagrass. There were some halophila patches or dead and halos in here, and this is halophila area, but mostly not very high coverage. And then these are the images from the local NGO in Krabi province, and the graphs, the data is from their monitoring. So they started monitoring at Aonamao site in Krabi province in 2021. They did seasonal monitoring, and you can see in 2023 the Krabi seagrasses were still healthy looking, while in 2024 the densities, this is percent of cover, the density started to decline. And this is more in, this graph shows more in detailed decline of the percent of cover from about 60% average coverage in May to 1.6 in October. There are some reports currently that some meadows are recovering, but we are still there. I mean, the Nature Mind is still monitoring these, so they will have updated data pretty soon. And of course, this is the site at Phang province, which is north towards Myanmar. It's very close to Myanmar border. We have visited it in 2022. This is the picture of very dense seagrass meadow, very healthy looking. In 2024, when the team went there to collect the data for a PhD student, the seagrasses were mostly covered with cyanobacteria and not very dense. So in terms of the causes that that resulted this change, the first idea was that because the first changes were observed at Libong Island in Trang, so it was believed that it was the isolated event. And the original idea was that it was a dredging of the river and sediment dumping. This is Trang River. And there is a big port further up the river. And the company was, they were deepening the canal, which is this, the water canal for the bigger ships and to come into the port. And actually this is the area of sediment dumping. So it was believed that, that in 2020, when they were dumping the sediment in this area, that a lot of sediment was actually ending up in this seagrass area here. And the Department of Marine and Coastal Resources in Thailand measured the deposition, which is the blue color of the sediment in a seagrass bed versus erosion in some areas. And this is the picture from 2020 from DMCR that was showing the original loss. So that was the original idea, but as since 2020, many additional observations were made and kind of piled on the cause, I would say. The additional one was about turtle grazing and overgrazing of the meadows, where the turtles would come and eat quite a lot of the seagrass bed, which resulted in very short and hollow leaves and chopped basically cut with the scissors with the leaf tip. That was one of the idea that was additional pressure, I would say. In January of this year, we had an opportunity to have Dr. Helen Marsh and Len McKenzie come to Thailand and observe the changes, because so far we are just gathering bits and pieces from all different sources and trying to put some kind of picture, but it's still not final. So both of them came to help out with their expertise for dugongs and seagrasses, and they produced key findings and the report of seagrass and dugongs, and basically from all of their observations and the discussions with the local experts, we still don't know the real cause of the decline, but it is most likely a combination of multiple factors, such as reduced light from the siltation, land runoff, the river discharge, some human activities, plus the sea temperatures changes, the elevated tidal exposure, additional nutrients, and on top of that is the herbivore pressure from the green turtles of the remaining shoots. So they put their findings as in the graphical representation, which was very easy to observe, where we can see the changes from very healthy in about 2017 or earlier, to first changes in 2018 and 19, to the current situation in 2023 and 2024. And of course, meadows all along Andaman coast, starting from Trang province, further north to Phuket, or even towards Myanmar and Malaysia. So both ways, they are in three, I would say, three stages. So either this stage, or that stage, the third stage of current changes and experiencing the losses. So far, we cannot pinpoint what is exactly the cause. Most likely it is the combination of all of the previous. So we are currently working to assess these changes using remote sensing on large scales. The drone images was something that we just gathered along the way, just so we can have some scientific proof that it is happening, and we can quantify in small scale, on a meadow scale. We are also working currently on the impacts of ecosystem services in terms of what is happening with blue carbon, what is happening with biodiversity. We might also expand further on into terms of the dugongs, because dugongs are migrating further north to Phuket. So we are looking right now into different impacts of how that is impacting various ecosystem services. So for now, we are hoping that we also start to look into long-term changes of the environmental data. We have some field data across different meadows. It's just a matter of putting it all together and using the remote sensing as additional layer to map and observe the changes across whole coast. And of course, I mentioned at the beginning that we believed that most of our meadows are intertidal. Currently, this is, for example, the picture at 14 meters depth of Halophila that was recorded by a local diver and posted on the social media in February this year in the meadow that has not been mapped yet. So we don't really know what we have in a deeper water. So we are hoping that, again, we'll start soon this or next year with further deep subtidal seagrass mapping, just so we can observe, if we can see if there are changes to those meadows, or is it just localized to intertidal meadows. And of course, the seagrass recovery plan. Currently, that is, I would say, a long way ahead of us, because we still don't know the causes. There are some talks about the restoration and so on, but just based on the current status of the science in terms of the restoration, we are, I would say, the seagrass recovery plan should be well planned for the future, just because currently we don't have the methodologies that would work for different sites, for different species, and so on. So this is where I would most likely ask all the suggestions and comments and so on if anyone has is willing and interested to collaborate with us. And I would say this is it for me. Oh, thank you very much. We have a lot of social media presence. We try our best to post everything that we find there to draw public's attention. So you can follow us there. You can write also the email to me. If you have seen or observed the changes in your area, of course, please send me the email, because we are looking if it is occurring only in Thailand, or it is also happening across the borders in Malaysia, Indonesia, or even Cambodia and so on. So if you have seen anything similar, please send me the email. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Milica. That was great. Yeah, I'm sure everybody else really enjoyed that. There was a lot of information there, a lot of mapping, a lot of changes, some of them quite worrying. Just while others think of some questions or points to comment on, I wonder, you mentioned about you've mapped the transitory versus the persistent meadows of seagrass. Is there anything that you can learn from those transitory ones about how the seagrass comes back after it has disappeared that you can use?
That's the thing. When we overlay that with the species composition, the transitory meadows were, for example, Cymodosia or Halophila, that were kind of seasonal, that were occurring very dense, and then another year they were very sparse, but they will return. But then in the blue color, there were permanent species. It was mostly in halos. So, and the first changes that were observed, not even only by us, but the local community as well, and the government, was on hills. So it, so it's not some, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So it was a bit different than what we actually expected to occur.
And if you're think it might naturally recover, what would be the mechanism for that? And have you looked into like dispersal modeling to see how tropicals might
Not
come in?
yet.
It's such a wide area that where's the nearest meadows that it might come from and how?
Yeah, we even don't know if we have to do, I think sometime it's on our list to do if there is a seed bank available for the species. We got a lot of suggestions from Australians, of course. You have a lot of experience, I would say. So we got a suggestion that we should just look in that if there is any seed bank that would start the natural recovery. I think for this year, there are some reports about Halophila returning, very small patches and not very dense. So we currently have a lot of field lined up, starting from beginning of March until May, June. So we are going to visit many different places. So hopefully that will give us a better overview. What is the current situation in 2025?
My mute wasn't working. Thanks, Micah. Is there any other questions from people online? Oh, there's one from Brittany. So Brittany is asking. Oh, sorry, I can't see it now. Brittany, did you want to ask it directly, or I'm just trying to? Oh, there we go. Could you simplify the methodologies that you performed for the remote sensing of the submerged seagrass? What algorithms did you use?
So currently most of our seagrass are intertidal. So we are not using any water column corrections. So our methodologies are pretty straightforward for that. You can send me the email if you would like to know. It's no, you are not using NDVI. I see the chat popping up. No, we are not using NDVI. I think here you have an expert. Genki is the expert on seagrass mapping. We had a workshop at Prince of Songkran University about seagrass mapping. So you don't use the NDVI just because the infrared band does not penetrate deep enough, and it reduces the strength as you go deeper along in the water. So even if you have the same density of the seagrass in the shallow and deep, it would have a different results. So we mostly use the red, green, and blue bands and rely on that. But since most of our seagrasses are intertidal, we are not using any specific methodologies like the water column correction, but since we are planning to do more of the subtidal mapping, we are working with the WESPA group for the habitat mapping to align our methodologies with the global standards, because I think in other countries, like in Europe, a lot of seagrass meadows are subtidal. So there are already methodologies available. It just the matter of aligning what works. But you are most cases using the red, green, and blue band, and you do the atmospheric corrections first, the water column corrections, and then you start to do the classification. And of course, you remove the deep water. But if you want to know more, you can send me the email. We can chat more about that.
Looks like Brittany's going to connect with you, so that's great. Any other questions for Milica? Or any suggestions for next steps? I think it's great that you're looking at the looking at the environmental changes, the environmental, to see, because I noticed with the schematics that you had in that last one, it seemed to be like that all the pressures had gone, like the nutrients and things like that. And I don't know if that was something you've observed or whether it was just, that's where we need to get to. But you also had the fact that obviously the seagrass had gone, so now there's a lot of resuspension. I think there was those little circle things doing resuspension that could stop things from coming back.
Yeah. So Len actually made a graph for their report. This one, I should have put the QR code, so if anyone is interested, they can read. I can maybe put in the chat. So if you're interested, you can read, because there is a section about the dugongs too. And just based on the dugongs, that the number of the size of the population declined, but also the number of calves as well. but you can go more in depth. I'm not really a dugong expert, so it's got beyond me.
We can share that link when we send out the video recording. There's another question here from Harris saying, has the seagrass loss triggered the setup or enhanced the effort of a community-based seagrass monitoring program in the country?
Not really. It's triggered the need for restoration, I would say. Even we still don't know the cause. So there is a lot of talk right now on about the restoration programs and how to restore seagrasses and so on, and different CSRs from stakeholders. Not so yeah, so it is going more in towards that direction, and we are trying to put it back along the path that it needs long-term monitoring, just to see, because if the current situation, current reports are saying that there is some recovery, so it might be that the seagrasses could potentially recover by themselves. It might take a year, several years, of course, but because with our restoration methodologies and protocols, has not been very successful on the large scale, I would say.
Was that focusing on inhalus for that
Yes.
restoration? Or
Yeah.
so a slow growing
Yes.
species that's
Yeah.
I think we've got some people online that are working with other slow growing things like Posidonias and everything that might be able to suggest some issues. But I suppose the problem you've got is that you're either planting them or putting them in, and you're probably going to wait 10, 20 years to expect to
Exactly.
know
I
more,
mean,
so.
I mean, they have DMCR did a very good restoration. It is a successful, I would say, where they planted in house on several hectares. It is in the patches just because it will take for a very long time to connect it to one continuous meadow. But when we went there to do data collection, it was very healthy. The in-house was very nice and healthy looking. There were animals there. There was bentos. I mean, it looked like a whole system was there. We did in terms of the carbon stocks, and if the restoration showed some carbon changes after several years of restoration. Unfortunately, it did not yet. So we don't know, is it just because of the species, the way it was planted, or it was just the whole area is non-depositional. So it's something that, I mean, some ecosystem services after restoration do return. Some of them might take a very long time to do it.
Good sign that it's surviving though, because that might indicate that at least water quality is improved. There's another question here from Lucy. She said that, thank you for a great talk. With the changes in species composition, I assume that there are substantial changes to the fish compositions, etc. too. Have you been speaking with community about changes in ecosystem services, and have you been looking at those services too, and the implications for these changes? So I guess you mentioned about the carbon. Have you looked at the changes in fish as well?
Yeah, we are planning this year to conduct a survey. We have had local community surveys about ecosystem services in terms of food security for several years now. We did pre-COVID, we did just after COVID, and then we are planning to do it again this year, just to see how much, because from the previous surveys we saw there is a lot of communities are relying on them, not only in the fish but also for gleaning, like shells, dugongs, sea cucumbers, and so on. So they are relying a lot on seagrass beds. For fish, catching fish, I think they go a bit more further in the ocean. But we are planning to have another set of interviews just to see how they are affected with the current state.
It looks like you've been really busy. And there's also a comment from Liz Sinclair. So Liz is working on some really successful Posidonia restoration, so some similarities probably there. She said it might be worth setting up some turtle dugong exclusion areas to encourage natural recovery and quantify their impact. So I don't know if you want to comment on that and whether the restoration that they've already had is having issues with being eaten.
Yeah, I think not. I think they haven't been eaten yet. But there are some exclusion cages. From some other university, they did actually on Inhalus. The Inhalus grew quite tall in within the cage, but it did not produce any flowers. So it is just growing in terms of the leaf size. Len visited it to see like how they put it as, I think, as a demonstration. I think also some local communities are doing that just to see if the seagrasses can possibly recover. But also the government, the MCR is doing that, but they are rotating the exclusion cages in several meadows, just because the pressure from grazing is too high right now, because a lot of dugongs are actually dying from malnourishment, which is very sad. I think that was the major cause in the last 2 years or so. So they are putting the exclusion cages and rotating them across the meadows, so the seagrasses can recover and the animals would come and eat. But all the animals, most of the turtles and dugongs, they migrated basically from Trang, where we had huge meadows that were supporting very large populations. But since this is gone, they moved. I think most of them went north towards Phuket, but all the meadows there are very small. And they cannot sustain on a long term that large size of both turtles and dugongs, which is where the problem comes.
Yeah, and have they seen any sort of displacement of dugongs onto other areas, increasing grazing pressure, causing problems in other areas?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions from Milica? We've just got 4 minutes left. I have had some emails from some people from WA that got the time wrong because they don't realise that Queensland doesn't have daylight saving, so or Eastern Standard Time. But this is all getting recorded. So if you are watching this on a recording and you'd like to get in contact with Milica, she's put her details on there, or if you would like to just send us anything that we can collate and send through to Milica suggestions. But hopefully you'll get a lot of people coming forwards to sort of offer some help and support, because it does sound like a quite a big issue, and I'm sure the seagrass community, like they do, will get behind you and help you. But it sounds like you're doing a lot there already. And
we are trying. We are trying, and we are
Well,
trying to, I'm trying going back through the literature and trying to read, because I know I recently became aware that massive die-offs have been recorded in several countries. So I'm trying to find all the literature and read more, how the their meadows recovered, what kind of studies they did and so on, so we can kind of plan what we can do. But definitely I would say I'm putting it out there. Any suggestions are more than welcome. The ideas and so on, just send me the email. Highly appreciate it.
Fantastic. Just looking across the room, see if I've missed any hands or comments, but yeah, I think we'll wrap up there. But just if everyone would like to join me again in thanking you, because that was a really great talk, and really, I mean, great but very sad, but yeah, really interesting to see what's happening there and all the great work that you guys are doing in Thailand. So thank you very much for today, and I hope everyone enjoyed this seminar, and there'll be news soon about our next seminar that we'll send through. But in the meantime, yes, thank you, Milica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Bye bye.